In this video, I discuss 6 common misunderstandings about Social Security. Coming up next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
Recently, I was at a conference and I was on a break. And on the break, there was a gentleman who recognized me from my YouTube channel. He struck up a conversation and we started to talk about what a lot of people talk about when they talk about this channel, and that's Social Security. He made a comment that Social Security was going bankrupt because the government is giving away free money to everybody and they just can't afford to do that anymore. After I highlighted the fact that 12.4% of every dollar earned goes into the Social Security Trust Fund, it occurred to me that I should probably create a video on common misconceptions about Social Security. This is that video. All right, let's get into it. Point number 1 is that anyone can get Social Security. That is not true. This is one of the most misunderstood points on Social Security and comes from one of 3 points. Point number 1 is confusing Social Security with state-sponsored benefits that are based on financial need. Confusing Social Security retirement benefits with other programs like Social Security Disability Insurance, which has some reasonably strict, in fact very strict criteria to get into the program. Confusing inter-country agreements on Social Security, something called a totalization payment, which allows expats from the United States working in another country who actually have to pay into the system in another country to count that as their contribution to Social Security and vice versa. Totalization agreements help expats avoid paying double Social Security, one to the country in which they're working and one to the U.S. And the final point is confusing Social Security on the primary insured with the spousal benefit or the dependent benefit. They are not the same. And to be really clear, in order for a worker to qualify for Social Security retirement benefits, they have to have 40 quarters of work earning a minimum amount of money. In 2022, that amount was $1,510 per quarter, and in 2023, it's $1,640 per quarter. Which brings us to point number 2, the misunderstanding that everybody gets the same Social Security payment. This confusion often stems from the discussion about the average Social Security payment. For example, in 2022, it was $1,657. People often think the only other variable is how long they wait to collect, whether it's 62, 65, 67, 70, for example. But there are at least 2 other variables: how much they earned and how long they worked. These 2 have a dramatic effect on the size of the Social Security payment. If this is something you're interested in, I'll put a link at the end of the video on how to maximize your Social Security payment. Misunderstanding number 3 is that Social Security is going bankrupt in 2034. Social Security is described as a pay-as-you-go system. This can be a bit confusing because pay-as-you-go sounds a bit like a bus ride. You get on, you pay, and you go. If you don't pay, you don't get to ride the bus. In this case, pay-as-you-go means that the current generation pays into Social Security and those funds are used to fund the previous generation's Social Security payment that they're receiving now. And those people paid in and funded the generation before them. In other words, everybody pays, it's just a matter of when you collect your Social Security payment. Social Security works as long as people continue to pay into the system more than it is taken out. This has been the case until recently. The baby boom created a record number of future workers who were born between 1946 and 1964, and as they started to work, the trust continued to build surpluses. These workers easily funded the previous generation, and the trust continued to grow until the 60s, when the number of children per family started to decline. This put a strain on the Social Security system, and amendments were made in 1983, 1995, and 2015. The amendments slowed the depletion in the trust, but they didn't reverse it. And so now the projected time to depletion is 2034. But I need to point out the obvious. There were already 3 times in history where there were changes to Social Security to keep it in the black. So this is highly, highly likely to happen again. There are 65 million voters who are receiving Social Security and almost as many on the heels of them that will receive Social Security in the next 20 to 30 years. But what happens if things go horribly wrong and we do end up at DEFCON 1? Well, Social Security will continue to be a pay-as-you-go system. And currently, 77% of the payment to those in retirement now comes from contributions made by the people who are working today. Point number 4, Social Security only covers the primary insured and his or her spouse. That's not true. For all of its red tape, Social Security extends pretty deep into the family when certain conditions are met. The spousal benefit is what most people think about when they think of Social Security, but it also covers minor children and children 18 and under if they're still in high school. Social Security also covers disabled children if they were disabled before age 22. Misunderstanding number 5, the ex-spouse doesn't get spousal benefits. Under certain circumstances, they do. If the marriage lasted more than 10 years and the ex-spouse, the one who's receiving spousal benefits, hasn't remarried, he or she qualifies for the spousal benefit. But here's the big issue. Spousal benefits don't kick in until the primary insured files for Social Security. And it's highly unlikely that the primary insured is going to coordinate benefits with his ex or her ex the way they would have if they were married. There is a workaround for this, and that is once the divorce has reached the 2-year mark, the ex-spouse is free to file for spousal benefits whether or not the primary insured has filed for his or her benefits. Misunderstanding number 6, people don't pay taxes on Social Security. Most of the time they do. The fact is, prior to 1983, a Social Security recipient could draw a CEO-sized pension and still not pay taxes on their Social Security benefit. Then once the Social Security Act passed in 1983, up to 50% of the recipient's Social Security payment was taxable as ordinary income if certain income thresholds were reached. In 1995, another act was passed pushing that number up to 85%, potentially up to 85% of the recipient's Social Security payment. Today, there are 3 times as many Social Security recipients paying taxes on their Social Security compared to 1984. This is because the thresholds have not been raised since they were originally put in place. As mentioned before, check out this video on how to get the maximum Social Security payment. It's one of my most popular. This is Jeff Schmidt. Thanks for watching.